The telegram arrived at the Boston boarding house on a Tuesday morning in March of 1882. But nobody knew who it was meant for until Nellie Emerson found the train ticket tucked inside her coat pocket 3 days later. She had been scrubbing floors at the textile mill for 6 years, ever since her parents died in the fire that took half the tenement block with it. At 22 years old, her hands were already rough as tree bark, her back perpetually aching from the endless hours bent over machinery that screamed and clattered from dawn until well past dark. The ticket was crisp, expensive, the kind of paper that didn't belong anywhere near her threadbare wool coat. She turned it over in her fingers that evening in her tiny rented room, reading the destination printed in bold black letters: Douglas, Arizona Territory. The ticket was dated for departure in 2 days. No note, no explanation, just her name written in elegant script on the envelope it came in, though the sender's information was conspicuously blank. Her roommate, Mary, suggested it was a mistake, perhaps someone with a similar name. But when Nellie went to the station master the next morning to inquire, the man looked at her with tired eyes and said, "Miss Emerson, yes, we have been expecting you. The ticket is legitimate, purchased and paid in full." "But who sent it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The station master shrugged. "No name attached, miss. Sometimes people do that, secret benefactors and the like." She should have been suspicious, should have thrown the ticket away and returned to the grinding monotony of her life. But something in her chest, some long-dormant spark of hope or desperation, or perhaps just the desire for something different, made her pack her few belongings into a canvas bag and board the train westward on that cold March morning. The journey took nearly a week. She watched the landscape transform outside the window, the crowded cities giving way to farmland, then plains, then the vast, empty stretches of territory that seemed to go on forever. Other passengers came and went. A woman with 3 children who got off in St. Louis. A salesman who talked too much about copper mines. An elderly couple heading to California to live with their son. Nellie kept to herself mostly, eating the bread and cheese she had brought, trying to make it last, trying not to think about what would happen when she arrived in Douglas with no money, no prospects, and no idea why she had been sent there. The train pulled into Douglas Station on a Tuesday afternoon, the sun blazing overhead in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The heat hit her like a physical force when she stepped off the train, so different from the damp chill of Boston that she actually gasped. The platform was nearly empty, just a few people waiting to board, a station attendant hauling luggage, and a tall man in dusty boots and a wide-brimmed hat leaning against a wooden post. Nellie stood there with her bag, completely lost, when the man pushed off from the post and walked toward her. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He looked to be in his mid-20s, lean and weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. "Miss Emerson." His voice was low, rough around the edges but not unkind. She nodded, unable to find words. "I am Yates Xavier." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of politeness. "I work at the Running River Ranch about 10 miles outside town. I was told to meet the train today and look for a young woman traveling alone from Boston." "Who told you that?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. He studied her for a moment, and something like sympathy crossed his features. "The ticket was sent by my employer, Miss Emerson. Though he asked me not to reveal that information until you arrived. He wanted to give you the choice to come or not, without feeling obligated." "I do not understand. I do not know anyone in Arizona. I have never even left Massachusetts before this week." Yates gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. Perhaps we should get you out of this heat first. I can explain on the way to the ranch if you are willing to come. If not, I can take you to the hotel in town and you can decide what you want to do." Nellie looked around at the dusty street, the low buildings, the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. She had come all this way. Turning back now seemed impossible, and besides, she had barely enough money for a single night in a hotel, let alone passage back to Boston. "I will come to the ranch," she said, lifting her chin with more confidence than she felt. He took her bag without asking and loaded it into the back of the wagon, then helped her up onto the seat. His hand was warm and calloused, strong without being rough. Once they were moving, the horse plodding along the dusty road out of town, he began to talk. "My employer is Samuel Garrett. He owns the Running River Ranch, one of the larger cattle operations in this part of the territory. About 8 months ago, he received a letter from a man named Thomas Emerson in Boston. The letter said that Thomas was dying, and he wanted to make arrangements for his daughter to be cared for after his death." Nellie's breath caught. "My father's name was Thomas." Yates glanced at her. Samuel said the letter explained that Thomas had borrowed money from him many years ago, back before either of them had much of anything. Thomas had used that money to start a business that eventually failed, and he always felt he owed Samuel more than just the money. He wrote that his daughter was working herself to death in a factory, and that he wished he could give her a better life. He asked if Samuel might be willing to offer her work on the ranch, something with room and board, a fresh start. Tears burned in Nellie's eyes. She had not known her father was corresponding with anyone before his death, had not known he was trying to arrange anything for her. She had thought he simply gave up, the way people did when life ground them down too far. Samuel wrote back immediately, agreeing to the arrangement. But by the time his letter reached Boston, Thomas Emerson had already passed away. "Samuel tried to find you, but the address Thomas had given was for a building that had burned down. It took months of inquiries and hired investigators to track you down to that boarding house. So he sent the ticket," Nellie whispered. "He wanted you to have the choice. That is why there was no name attached, no pressure, just an opportunity if you wanted to take it." They rode in silence for a while. The landscape was unlike anything Nellie had ever seen, all red earth and scrub brush and endless sky. It was harsh and beautiful and terrifying all at once. She could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. "What kind of work would I be doing?" she asked finally. "The ranch house needs help. Samuel's wife passed away 2 years ago, and he has been managing on his own since then. The place needs a woman's touch," he says. "Cooking, cleaning, mending. He also mentioned that you might help with the accounts if you can read and write well." "I can," Nellie said. "My mother was a school teacher before she married. She made sure I had an education." Yates nodded. "That will be useful. Samuel is better with cattle than he is with numbers. And you?" The question came out before she could stop it. "What is your role at the ranch?" "I am the foreman. I manage the hands, oversee the herding and branding, make sure everything runs smoothly. I have been working for Samuel for 5 years now." There was something in the way he said it, a note of pride mixed with affection, that told her he considered the ranch more than just employment. The ranch house appeared on the horizon after about an hour of riding. It was larger than Nellie expected, a sprawling structure of wood and stone with a wide porch and several outbuildings scattered around it. Corrals held horses and cattle, and she could see men working in the distance, their voices carrying on the dry air. Samuel Garrett was waiting on the porch. He was older than Nellie had imagined, probably in his late 50s, with silver hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the sun. But his eyes were kind when he helped her down from the wagon, and his smile was genuine. "Miss Emerson, I am very glad you decided to come." "I do not know how to thank you, Mr. Garrett. I had no idea my father had arranged this. Thomas was a good man. I am sorry I could not help him sooner, but I am glad to help you now if you will let me." She nodded, overwhelmed by the generosity of this stranger who owed her nothing. Samuel showed her through the house. It was spacious and well built, but he was right about it needing attention. Dust covered most surfaces, the kitchen was cluttered with unwashed dishes, and the whole place had the slightly neglected air of a home without a woman's care. Her room was upstairs, small but clean, with a window that looked out over the corrals toward the mountains. "You can start tomorrow," Samuel said. "Today, just rest and get your bearings. Yates will show you around the property later, introduce you to the hands. We eat dinner at 6. Nothing fancy, I am afraid. Usually whatever the men throw together." That first evening, Nellie sat at the long table in the dining room with Samuel, Yates, and 4 ranch hands whose names she struggled to remember. The food was simple, beans and beef and bread, but there was plenty of it. The men were polite but curious, sneaking glances at her when they thought she was not looking. Yates sat across from her, mostly quiet, answering when spoken to but not volunteering much. After dinner, as promised, he offered to show her around. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that took her breath away. They walked past the corrals where horses dozed in the fading light, past the barn where the smell of hay and animals was thick and not unpleasant. "It is very different from Boston," she said, and immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. "I imagine so. I have never been east of Texas myself." "Where are you from originally?" "Kansas. My family had a farm there, but it failed when I was 16. Drought took everything. I have been working ranches ever since." "Do you ever miss it, having your own place?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Sometimes, but I like it here. Samuel is a fair boss and the work is good. Honest." They stopped near a fence where they could see the last of the light reflecting off a thin stream that wound through the property. The running river, she assumed, though it was barely more than a creek. "I hope you will be happy here," Yates said suddenly, turning to look at her. "I know it must be strange, coming all this way to a place you have never been." "Strange," Nellie agreed, "but not unwelcome. I think perhaps my father knew what he was doing, even if I do not understand it all yet. He must have loved you very much." The simple statement nearly undid her. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this man she barely knew. "Yes, I think he did." The first weeks passed in a blur of activity. Nellie threw herself into the work with a determination born of gratitude and necessity. She scrubbed the ranch house from top to bottom, organized the kitchen, took over the cooking with a competence that surprised even her. The meals she prepared were simple but good, and she could see the appreciation in the men's faces when they sat down to hot food that actually had seasoning and care put into it. Samuel was kind and grandfatherly, often thanking her for small things and making sure she did not work too hard. The ranch hands were respectful, keeping their distance but greeting her politely when they crossed paths. And Yates was everywhere, it seemed, always working, always moving, but somehow always aware of where she was and whether she needed anything. He fixed the pump in the kitchen when it started leaking, brought in extra firewood without being asked, helped her move a heavy trunk she wanted to use for storage. Small things, but done with a quiet attentiveness that made her heart do strange things in her chest. She tried to ignore it. Tried to tell herself that he was just being helpful, that it meant nothing. But she could not ignore the way her pulse quickened when he walked into a room, or the way she found herself looking for him throughout the day, or the way his rare smiles made her feel like the sun had come out from behind clouds. One evening in early May, about 6 weeks after her arrival, she was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when Yates came in through the back door. He was dusty and tired, his shirt stained with sweat and dirt. "Long day?" she asked, glancing up at him. "We had a heifer stuck in a wash. Took 4 of us to get her out." He moved to the basin and washed his hands, then turned to face her. "That smells good. Just bread. Nothing special." "Everything you make is special compared to what we were eating before." She felt her cheeks warm and focused on the dough. "You are easy to please." "Maybe." He leaned against the counter watching her work. "Or maybe you are just talented." There was something in his voice that made her look up, and when their eyes met, the air in the room seemed to shift. She could see something in his gaze, something warm and intent that made her breath catch. "Nellie," he said quietly, and the sound of her first name in his low voice sent a shiver down her spine. He had never used it before, always calling her Miss Emerson with careful propriety. "Yes." He opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. "Never mind. I should go clean up before dinner." He left quickly, and Nellie stood there with her hands in the dough, her heart pounding, wondering what he had been about to say. The tension between them grew over the following weeks. It was nothing obvious, nothing that anyone else would notice, but Nellie felt it like a constant hum beneath her skin. The way Yates's hand would brush hers when he passed her something at the table. The way he always seemed to position himself near her when they were in the same room. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. She knew she should not encourage it. Should not let herself feel what she was feeling. He was the foreman, she was the housekeeper, and there were proprieties to consider. But her heart did not care about propriety. Her heart only knew that Yates Xavier was good and kind and hardworking, that he treated her with respect, that when he smiled at her, it felt like being given a precious gift. In late May, Samuel asked Yates to ride into Douglas to pick up supplies and check on a horse he was thinking of buying. It was a full day's trip there and back. Yates asked Nellie if she wanted to come along to see the town properly and perhaps pick up anything she needed. Samuel encouraged her to go. "You have been working too hard," he said. "Take a day to breathe." So she found herself sitting beside Yates in the wagon again, heading back toward the town where she had arrived 2 months earlier. The morning was already warm, promising a hot afternoon, but there was a breeze that made it bearable. They talked more easily now than they had at first. She told him about Boston, about her life before the ranch, about her parents and the dreams she had given up on. He told her about Kansas, about his 2 younger sisters who had married farmers and stayed there, about the years of drifting before he found his place at the running river. "Do you ever think about settling down?" she asked. "Having your own family." He was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think I would someday, but I never met anyone who made me want to change my life. Until recently." Her heart skipped. "Recently?" He glanced at her, and the look in his eyes was unmistakable. "Yes." She did not know what to say. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. She wanted to ask him to clarify, to tell her exactly what he meant, but fear held her tongue. Fear of being wrong, of misunderstanding, of Rue.